The first snowfall of winter descended upon Mount Urey like whispered secrets. Flakes pirouetted through the air before settling on the ancient training grounds of the Snow Empire's most reclusive master. Among these hallowed spaces where blade song merged with blood magic, Ryo Kenzaki stood alone, his silhouette sharp against the gathering white. Dawn had barely broken when Ryo began his daily ritual. The sole disciple of Master Hoshin moved with deliberate grace, his sword, the legendary blood moon, cutting through the falling snow with such precision that individual flakes parted around the blade rather than landing upon it. Ryo's breath formed clouds in the frigid air as he progressed through increasingly complex forms. Each movement a meditation. Balance, he whispered to himself, recalling Master Hoshin's teachings. The sword is not for destruction, but for maintaining balance. Yet doubt lingered in his mind like morning mist. For 8 years, he had trained under Master Hoshin, mastering techniques that blended the ancient art of swordsmanship with the mystical blood music magic unique to the Snow Empire. Still, Ryo questioned whether he was worthy of wielding Blood Moon, a blade said to contain the very essence of cosmic harmony. His thoughts scattered as the distant sound of engines disrupted the mountain's tranquility. Ryo paused mid-stance, Blood Moon held horizontally before him. No vessels were scheduled to arrive today, especially not at the remote monastery where Master Hoshin had chosen to seclude himself decades ago. From the courtyard, Ryo watched as a sleek obsidian ship descended through the cloud cover. Its hull bore the unmistakable insignia of the Kravtor Empire, jagged, asymmetrical marks etched in burning crimson against the black metal. The aggressive alien race rarely ventured to Earth, and never with peaceful intentions. "Master," Ryo called out, though he knew Hoshin would already be aware. The old master had an uncanny sense for disturbances in the flow of energy around his sanctuary. No response came. As always, Master Hoshin would observe from afar, testing his student's judgment. The ship landed with surprising gentleness on the stone courtyard, its engines humming to silence. A ramp extended from its underside, touching the snow-dusted ground with a soft hiss. 6 figures emerged, 5 warriors in metallic exoskeletons flanking a central figure draped in flowing robes of iridescent material that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Ryo recognized the central figure as a Kravtor ambassador from the ceremonial headdress that curved upward like frozen flames. Their species stood nearly 7 feet tall, with gray-purple skin and 4 arms. The lower pair typically reserved for diplomatic gestures, while the upper maintained constant readiness for combat. "I am Ambassador Tholkar of the Sovereign Kravtor domain," the figure announced in a voice that seemed to originate from multiple points within its throat. "We seek audience with the wielder of Blood Moon." Ryo stepped forward, sliding his blade into its scabbard in a deliberate, unhurried motion. "I am Ryo Kenzaki, disciple of Master Hoshin and current bearer of Blood Moon. State your purpose." "Ambassador." Ambassador Tholkar's facial ridges shifted in what Ryo recognized as their equivalent of a smile, though it carried no warmth. "We come to honor an ancient tradition. The alignment of the 7 moons of Kravtor with your planet occurs but once every 3 centuries. It is customary to acknowledge all wielders of the great cosmic blades during this time." Something in the ambassador's tone struck Ryo as false, but diplomacy demanded courtesy. "The Snow Empire welcomes your delegation. A ceremony can be arranged." "The ceremony begins now," Tholkar interrupted, motioning to one of the warriors. "We have brought the traditional offerings." Before Ryo could respond, the courtyard erupted with activity as monks and students emerged from the monastery buildings, drawn by curiosity about their unusual visitors. Even several members of the Snow Empire's council appeared, having arrived days earlier for their annual assessment of the monastery's political value. Rio felt a flicker of unease. This impromptu gathering was turning into exactly the kind of public spectacle Master Hoshin abhorred. The warrior approached, carrying an ornate box inlaid with what appeared to be crystallized fire. With ceremonial slowness, Tholkar opened it to reveal a cushion bearing 7 small metallic thorns that pulsed with internal energy. "Present your blade, Kenzaki," Tholkar commanded, abandoning all pretense of deference. Protocol and training urged caution. But with the eyes of both his students and the council upon him, Rio found himself bound by expectation. He drew Blood Moon with formal precision, holding it horizontally before him. The legendary blade caught the morning light, its metal seeming to flow like liquid mercury despite its solid form. "The Kravtor acknowledged this weapon," Tholkar announced loudly. Then, without warning, he plucked one of the thorns from the cushion and flicked it toward the blade. Rio's instinct was to parry, but something held him back, a warning in Master Hoshin's teachings about pride becoming the downfall of even the greatest swordsman. He allowed the thorn to make contact with Blood Moon's surface. The moment it touched the blade, the thorn burst into a web of crackling energy that spread across the sword's surface. A discordant metallic screech filled the air, causing several monks to cover their ears in pain. The blade's usual luminous sheen dulled instantly, as though some essential quality had been stripped away. Tholkar's laugh echoed across the courtyard. "As I suspected. The great Blood Moon is nothing but ordinary metal infused with primitive magic." The ambassador turned to address the gathered audience. "The Kravtor have come to correct historical inaccuracies. This weapon is no cosmic blade, merely a relic of a civilization that borrowed our technology without understanding it." Rio stood frozen, his heart pounding against his ribs as Blood Moon grew heavy in his hands. This was no honor ceremony, it was a calculated public humiliation. The thorn had somehow disrupted the blade's connection to whatever source powered its legendary abilities. "What have you done?" Rio demanded, his voice barely controlled. "Simply revealed truth," Tholkar replied, all 4 arms now gesturing in theatrical satisfaction. "The neural disruptor breaks the connection between blade and wielder, exposing the fraud. A true cosmic blade would have rejected our technology." The council members exchanged troubled glances. The Snow Empire's prestige was intimately connected to the legend of Blood Moon and its wielders. If the Kravtor could so easily diminish its power. "This is an outrage," one council member finally spoke. "An unprovoked attack on our cultural heritage." Tholkar's facial ridges flattened in dismissal. "Cultural appropriation, you mean? The energies your blade once channeled were stolen from a civilization we conquered millennia ago. We merely reclaim what is rightfully ours." With practiced coordination, the Kravtor delegation began retreating toward their ship. At the ramp, Tholkar turned. "We leave you to contemplate the truth. Humans, your empire stands on borrowed glory." As the ship ascended into the clouds, Rio remained motionless, the now dull Blood Moon still extended before him. Around him, whispers rippled through the gathered crowd. His students, those who had believed in him, trained under him, now looked at him with uncertainty. The council members' expressions ranged from fury to calculation, already assessing the political fallout. And still Master Hoshin remained absent. When Rio finally lowered the blade, he felt a weight beyond its physical form. The Kravtor had not come to fight with swords as he might have expected. They had come to fight with shame, a far more devastating weapon. The real battle, he realized, had only just begun. Hours after the Kravtor delegation's departure, Rio knelt in the meditation hall, Blood Moon laid before him on a ceremonial cloth. The blade remained dull, its usual subtle pulse of energy absent. He had tried every purification ritual he knew, every technique Master Hoshin had taught him for restoring harmony to disturbed energies. Nothing had worked. They knew exactly how to target it, a voice observed from the doorway. Ryo didn't need to look up to recognize Chiyoko, the monastery's archivist and his closest confidant. She entered silently, her formal robes exchanged for practical travel attire. This wasn't a random insult, she continued, kneeling across from him. The Kravtor came prepared with specific technology designed to disrupt Blood Moon's energy signature. Why? Ryo asked, his voice hollow. What could they possibly gain? Chiyoko placed a weathered scroll between them. Politics, perhaps, or something deeper. I've been researching since they left. She unrolled the document, revealing ancient diagrams of what appeared to be Blood Moon alongside astronomical charts. The alignment they mentioned is real, but it's not a time for honoring cosmic blades. It's when the dimensional barriers thin between our world and the realm that powers them. Ryo's eyes narrowed. You think they're planning something during this alignment? I think they already have spies searching for something. Chiyoko's expression grew grave. 3 of the Council's guards reported unusual activity near the Ice Glacier Conglomerate's research facility. Beings matching Kravtor physiology, but using stealth technology to avoid detection. The Ice Glacier Conglomerate housed the Snow Empire's most sensitive research, including studies on the ancient power sources that had once fueled weapons like Blood Moon. My students are guarding that facility, Ryo realized, rising to his feet. Yes, and now they're facing an enemy they don't understand, while their master has been publicly humiliated. Chiyoko's directness was one of her most valuable qualities. The Council is already debating whether to recall them under different leadership. Anger flared in Ryo's chest, quickly tempered by Master Hoshin's teachings. Anger clouded judgment, and judgment was what he needed now. Have you spoken with Master Hoshin? He asked. Chiyoko shook her head. No one has seen him since before the Kravtor arrived. His quarters remain empty. This wasn't unusual. The old master often disappeared for days, testing his disciples' independence. But the timing felt significant. I need to discover what the Kravtor are truly after. Ryo decided sliding Blood Moon back into its scabbard despite its diminished state. And why they targeted this blade specifically. The Council won't authorize an investigation, Chiyoko warned. They're too busy managing the political fallout. Several provincial lords are already questioning the monastery's special status now that its legendary blade appears compromised. I'm not asking for authorization. Ryo moved toward the door with newfound purpose. I'm asking if you'll help me. Chiyoko smiled, already retrieving a pack she had prepared. I've mapped our route to the Mist Forest. If the ancient texts are correct, we'll find answers at the dimensional gate hidden there, the original source of Blood Moon's power, and my students at the research facility. I've sent them a coded message warning of potential infiltration. They're your students, Ryo. They'll hold their position until you arrive. Ryo nodded, grateful for her foresight. We leave at nightfall. The Council will be occupied with their emergency session until morning. As they prepared for their journey, a shadow of doubt still lingered in Ryo's mind. Was he abandoning his post to chase answers that might not exist? Or worse, was he motivated by wounded pride rather than duty? The monastery bell rang, signaling evening meditation. Throughout the complex, monks and students would be gathering, seeking guidance that Ryo suddenly felt unqualified to provide. Sometimes the path of balance requires stepping away from what seems secure, Chiyoko said, reading his hesitation. Master Hoshin taught you that, didn't he? He did, Ryo acknowledged. though I never expected to test that teaching quite like this. As darkness fell, they slipped away from the monastery, leaving behind whispers and political maneuvering to seek truth in the mythic Mist Forest, a place where technology and spirit were said to merge in ways neither science nor religion fully understood. What awaited them there, Rio couldn't begin to imagine, but he felt certain that the true purpose of the Kravtor's public humiliation would prove far more dangerous than mere political embarrassment. The Mist Forest lived up to its name. By midday, Rio and Chiyoko found themselves engulfed in swirling vapors that transformed familiar landscapes into dreamlike abstractions. Trees appeared and disappeared as they passed, their forms elongated and fluid in the perpetual twilight created by the dense fog. The old texts weren't exaggerating, Chiyoko murmured, consulting an ancient map projected from a device on her wrist. Antiquarian she might be by profession, but she embraced technology that served her purposes. The mist isn't natural, it's a boundary effect from the dimensional gate's influence on our reality. Rio walked slightly ahead, one hand resting on Blood Moon's hilt. Though the blade remained dormant, he found comfort in the familiar weight at his side. Can your scanner detect any Kravtor signatures? They may have reached the forest before us. Chiyoko adjusted her device. Nothing yet, but this interference makes readings unreliable. We should... A low, mechanical growl interrupted her, emanating from somewhere within the mist to their left. Both froze, listening as the sound circled them with predatory deliberation. What is that? Rio whispered, slowly drawing Blood Moon despite its compromised state. Trouble, Chiyoko replied, her hand moving to the small energy pistol concealed within her robes. Though the monastery officially eschewed modern weapons, Chiyoko had never accepted that particular restriction. And definitely not natural. The creature that emerged from the mist confirmed her assessment. It resembled a massive wolf in general outline, but its body was a disturbing amalgamation of organic tissue and cybernetic components, where eyes should have been. Crimson scanning beams swept the forest floor. Its muscles rippled beneath skin that periodically revealed the metallic skeleton beneath. A Kravtor sentinel beast, Chiyoko identified, raising her weapon. They use them to patrol conquered territories, which means they're already claiming this forest, Rio concluded grimly. The beast charged without warning, moving with impossible speed for its size. Rio pivoted, swinging Blood Moon in an arc that should have cleaved through the creature's shoulder, but the blade bounced off with a discordant clang, sending painful vibrations up Rio's arm. The sword's not working. Chiyoko fired her energy pistol, the blast scorching the beast's flank but doing little to slow its advance. Rio recovered quickly, years of training taking over. If the blade wouldn't cut, he would use it differently. As the beast lunged again, he sidestepped and struck its head with Blood Moon's pommel, using the sword as a bludgeoning tool rather than a cutting edge. The creature stumbled, disoriented by the blow, giving Chiyoko time to target one of its mechanical joints. Her next shot found the connection between organic limb and cybernetic enhancement, severing the circuit. The beast howled a sound halfway between animal pain and electronic feedback. There's a control node at the base of its skull, Chiyoko called out, dodging as the creature thrashed in their direction. If we can... She never finished the sentence. The beast recovered with unnatural quickness, lunging toward her with jaws extended to reveal serrated metal teeth. Rio threw himself forward without thinking, interposing himself between Chiyoko and certain death. As the creature's jaws closed around Blood Moon's blade, something unexpected happened. The sword dormant since the Kravtor's sabotage pulsed once with faint red light. The beast recoiled as if burned, backing away with mechanical whines of distress. It reacted to the blade, Rio realized, advancing as the creature retreated. Even compromised, Blood Moon affects it somehow. Chiyoko didn't waste the opportunity. She circled behind the disoriented beast and fired precisely at the control node she had identified. The creature collapsed mid-stride, its cybernetic components powering down with a series of diminishing whirs. In the silence that followed, Rio examined Blood Moon. The brief illumination had faded, leaving the blade as dull as before. "What just happened?" he asked, more to himself than to Chiyoko. She approached the fallen sentinel, cautiously examining its construction. The creature's technology. It's similar to what the Kravtor used on your sword. Almost as if... As if what? As if they're two pieces of the same whole. Chiyoko looked up, her expression troubled. "Rio, I don't think the Kravtor were lying about conquering the civilization that created Blood Moon's power source. I think they've been using that same technology all along." Rio stared at the blade in his hand with new uncertainty. Then why would Master Hoshin never mention this connection? He taught me Blood Moon's history in detail. Perhaps he didn't know, Chiyoko suggested, though her tone suggested she doubted this. Or perhaps he had reasons to keep certain truths hidden. The mist swirled around them, thickening as if responding to their discovery. Deeper in the forest, more mechanical sounds echoed, distant but approaching. "We need to move," Rio decided, sheathing Blood Moon. That wasn't their only sentinel. They pressed forward, deeper into the mist forest, guided by Chiyoko's ancient maps and a growing sense that whatever answers awaited them would not bring comfort, only more difficult choices. As they advanced, the mist began to thin in peculiar patterns, forming what almost seemed like pathways through the dense forest. Rio noticed that these clearings often aligned with the direction that felt most right to him, as if Blood Moon were somehow guiding their journey despite its dormant state. "The blade is connected to this place," he observed after several such occurrences. "Even without its power, it remembers the way." Chiyoko nodded thoughtfully. "In the oldest texts, Blood Moon isn't described as a weapon but as a key. Perhaps that aspect remains functional." Their path eventually led to a massive clearing where the mist parted entirely to reveal a sight that stopped them both in their tracks. Rising from the forest floor was what appeared to be an ancient temple, its architecture unlike anything in human history. Curved structures of some opalescent material spiraled upward, intersecting in physically impossible ways that challenged perception. But the temple had not been spared the ravages of time, or more likely, deliberate destruction. Massive sections had been torn away, revealing an interior that pulsed with the same dull red energy that had momentarily awakened in Blood Moon during their confrontation with the sentinel beast. The dimensional gate, Chiyoko breathed in awe. The texts called it the Pillar of Divinity, the connection point between our world and the source of cosmic power. "And the Kravtor have already found it," Rio added grimly, pointing to the unmistakable tracks of heavy equipment around the temple's base and the telltale energy signatures of Kravtor technology attached to the structure like parasites. They approached cautiously, using the scattered debris for cover. From their concealed vantage point, they could see several Kravtor warriors operating equipment that appeared to be extracting energy from the temple's core. "They're harvesting the power source," Chiyoko whispered. "The same energy that once powered Blood Moon." Rio watched as pulses of crimson energy were drawn from the temple into containment units bearing the Kravtor Imperial insignia. Each extraction seemed to dim the temple's remaining luminescence. "They're killing it," he realized with mounting horror. Whatever consciousness resides in that energy, they're draining it away piece by piece. Chiyoko's face paled. The ancient texts speak of the pillar as a sentient entity, a being that willingly shared its power with worthy civilizations. If the Kravtor are forcibly extracting that energy, then we're witnessing more than theft, we're witnessing murder. Rio finished, His hand tightened around Blood Moon's hilt as unprecedented anger welled within him. We have to stop them. There are at least 20 warriors out there, Rio with advanced weaponry, and your sword isn't functioning. Chioko's pragmatism, usually a balancing force, now felt like an obstacle. We need to gather information first, understand what we're facing. Rio knew she was right, but something deeper than tactical consideration pulled at him. Blood Moon seemed to vibrate faintly against his palm, responding to proximity to its power source. If we wait, there may be nothing left to save, he argued. Before Chioko could respond, a new sound drew their attention, the distinctive hum of Kravtor transport ships approaching from above. Through gaps in the forest canopy, they could see 3 vessels descending toward the temple clearing. Reinforcements, Chioko observed tensely. Or... The first ship touched down, its ramp extending to reveal not more warriors but a figure Rio recognized immediately. Ambassador Tholkar, now dressed in ceremonial battle armor that accentuated all 4 arms with weapons of disturbing complexity. Not reinforcements, Rio corrected. Leadership. Whatever they're planning here has escalated to the next phase. They watched as Tholkar inspected the extraction operation, occasionally gesturing toward specific parts of the temple with authoritative sweeps of his upper arms. The warriors responded with efficient adjustments to their equipment, increasing the flow of energy into the containment units. We need to get closer, Rio decided, close enough to hear what they're saying. Chioko nodded reluctantly. There's a maintenance passage beneath the temple mentioned in the scrolls. If it still exists, we might be able to access it from the eastern approach, where the tree cover is densest. They retreated into the mist, circling around to approach from the direction Chioko had indicated. As they drew closer to the temple from this new angle, Rio felt Blood Moon's vibration intensify. He withdrew the blade slightly from its scabbard and was startled to see faint traces of its former luminescence returning, not the full power it once possessed, but definite signs of reawakening. The sword is responding to proximity, he told Chioko. Whatever the Kravtor did to it isn't permanent, not here, near the source. She eyed the blade with cautious optimism. That could be an advantage, but also a risk. If it's reconnecting to the energy source, the Kravtor might be able to detect that connection. They found the maintenance passage exactly where the ancient texts had indicated. A narrow opening beneath twisted roots that had grown around the temple's foundation. The passage beyond was tight but navigable, leading inward toward the temple's core. As they crawled through the confined space, the walls around them pulsed with increasingly frequent waves of red light, accompanied by a sound like distant heartbeats. It's dying, Chioko whispered, her voice tight with emotion that surprised Rio. The normally analytical archivist seemed deeply affected by the temple's plight. Each extraction weakens the central consciousness. The passage eventually opened into a small chamber directly beneath what must have been the temple's central hall. Through gaps in the ancient ceiling, they could see Kravtor warriors moving above them and hear fragments of conversation. In final phase begins at alignment. Tholkar was saying when with the Blood Moon neutralized, there will be no interference when we collapse the dimensional boundary. Ooh, what of the other blades, Ambassador? Another voice asked. Without their source, they are merely metal. The humans have forgotten how to reforge the connection. That fool Hoshin was the last who might have remembered, and he has hidden himself away rather than face the truth. Rio stiffened at the mention of his master. Chioko placed a warning hand on his arm, urging continued silence. And the consciousness? The second voice inquired. Tholkar's laugh held no warmth. Nearly depleted. Once we have extracted the core essence, the entity that our ancestors so foolishly worshipped will finally die. The power will be ours alone to command, without the restrictions it once imposed. Restrictions? Balance. Tholkar spat the word as if it tasted bitter. The entity demanded balance in all things, power without destruction, defense without aggression, meaningless limitations that kept our empire from its rightful expansion. The revelation struck Rio like a physical blow. Balance, the same principle Master Hoshin had taught him throughout his training. The core tenet of Blood Moon's philosophy wasn't human at all, but derived from the very entity the Kravtor were now destroying. "We need to warn the Council," Chioko whispered urgently. "If they're planning to collapse the dimensional boundary during the alignment, it could affect reality far beyond this forest." Rio nodded, though his mind raced with implications. "We'll retreat the way we came. Return to—" A sudden, violent tremor interrupted him as the temple shuddered around them. Above, they heard Tholkar shout, "Increase extraction rate. The entity is resisting." Another tremor, stronger than the first, sent dust and debris raining down on them. Through the ceiling gaps, Rio glimpsed something extraordinary, the central core of the temple, visible now as equipment had been moved aside, pulsing with desperate intensity. Within that pulsing energy, patterns formed and dissolved, almost like a face struggling to manifest. And in that moment, Blood Moon fully awakened in its scabbard, glowing with renewed purpose that illuminated their hiding place. "They'll detect us," Chioko warned, but it was already too late. "Intruders below," a Kravtor voice called out. "Energy signature matching the Blood Moon." Their position compromised. Rio made an instant decision. "Run! Get back to the monastery, warn the Council. I'll create a diversion." "I'm not leaving you," Chioko protested. "Someone has to deliver the warning," Rio insisted, drawing Blood Moon. The blade now shone with nearly its full former glory, responding to the desperate energy pulses from the temple's core. "Go, Chioko, please." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Don't sacrifice yourself needlessly, Rio. The blade chose you for a reason." With that, she disappeared back into the maintenance passage. Alone now. Rio considered his options. Above, he could hear Kravtor warriors organizing to capture him. His position was indefensible, but perhaps that wasn't the point. If Blood Moon was truly awakening in response to the temple's distress, perhaps there was a deeper connection he had yet to understand. Taking a deep breath, Rio placed his palm against the pulsing wall of the chamber. "I hear you," he whispered to whatever consciousness might remain in the temple. "Show me how to help." The response came not in words, but in visions that flooded his mind, images of a civilization that had once partnered with the entity, creating blades like Blood Moon not as weapons but as conduits for balance throughout the cosmos. He saw the Kravtor ancestors arriving not as conquerors initially, but as another partner race, eventually corrupted by desires for domination that led them to betray their benefactor. And he saw Master Hoshin, much younger, discovering the temple decades ago, communing with the entity and accepting the responsibility of guarding Blood Moon not as its master, but as its custodian. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Rio gasping but filled with new resolve. The temple had shown him not just history but purpose. Blood Moon wasn't meant to fight the Kravtor, it was meant to restore balance to the dimensional gate. With clarity born of this understanding, Rio emerged from hiding not in retreat but advancing directly toward the temple's core. Blood Moon held before him like a beacon. Kravtor warriors shouted in alarm, weapons trained on the lone human who dared challenge their operation. Ambassador Tholkar pushed through their ranks, all four arms raised in gestures of both threat and surprise. "The disciple of Hoshin," Tholkar observed with mocking formality. "Come to witness the death of your blade's spirit?" "No," Rio replied with newfound calm. I've come to restore balance. He raised Blood Moon toward the pulsing core of the temple. The blade's illumination intensified, matching the rhythm of the entity's fading heartbeat. Something passed between the man acknowledgement, a renewal of ancient promises. Tholkar's expression shifted from mockery to alarm. Stop him! The blade is reconnecting to the source. Warriors moved to intercept, but Rio had already begun the form Master Hoshin had taught him for channeling energy not to destroy, but to harmonize. Blood Moon traced complex patterns in the air, each movement releasing threads of crimson light that flowed toward the temple's core. You cannot prevent the inevitable, Tholkar declared, activating weapons mounted on his upper arms. Your master understood this, which is why he hides rather than faces us. The age of balance is ending. The age of Kravtor dominance begins. The accusation against Master Hoshin stung. But Rio maintained his focus, completing the channeling form. Blood Moon now burned so brightly that several warriors shielded their eyes. You're wrong about Master Hoshin, Rio replied, though uncertainty lingered in his heart. Where was his teacher when the Snow Empire faced such a threat? And you're wrong about balance. It isn't a limitation, it's the only sustainable path forward. Tholkar's response was to fire. Energy blasts converged on Rio from multiple directions as warriors joined their leader's attack. Without conscious thought, Rio shifted to defensive forms, Blood Moon moving with fluid precision to intercept each blast. Where the energies struck the blade, they were absorbed rather than deflected, feeding the connection between sword and temple. The exchange couldn't last forever. For every blast Rio intercepted, another came closer to finding its mark. His movements began to slow as exhaustion set in. The Kravtor pressed their advantage, circling to attack from all sides. Just as Rio's situation seemed hopeless, the temple itself intervened. The floor beneath the Kravtor warriors liquefied momentarily, throwing them off balance. The walls pulsed with renewed strength, sections shifting to create barriers between Rio and his attackers. The temple was defending him. Tholkar, more agile than his warriors, leapt over a forming barrier to confront Rio directly. All four arms now wielded weapons energy blades in the upper pair, pulse cannons in the lower. The entity wastes its final strength on you, the ambassador snarled. A foolish expenditure. Their combat was brief but intense. Rio, though skilled with Blood Moon, found himself overwhelmed by Tholkar's four-armed assault. Wounds opened across his body as energy blades slipped past his defense. A blast from a pulse cannon sent him sprawling against the temple wall, Blood Moon nearly falling from his grasp. Tholkar approached for the killing blow, upper arms raised triumphantly. Your master was wise to hide. Perhaps you should have followed his example. As consciousness began to fade, Rio heard a new sound cutting through the chaos, the distinctive tone of another blade being drawn. This one resonating at a frequency that made Blood Moon vibrate in response. My disciple, a familiar voice declared, has more courage in his doubt than you possess in your certainty, Tholkar. Through blurred vision, Rio beheld an impossible sight. Master Hoshin, no longer in monk's robes but battle attire that hadn't been seen in the Snow Empire for decades, wielding a second cosmic blade that shimmered with blue-white energy. Hoshin, Tholkar breathed, genuine fear entering his voice for the first time. The report said you had fled. I never flee, Master Hoshin replied, advancing with measured steps. I observe, I plan, and when necessary, I act. As consciousness slipped away, Rio heard Master Hoshin's final declaration. You have insulted my son, Tholkar. Now witness the consequence. The world went dark. When Rio regained consciousness, the temple chamber had transformed. where Kravtor extraction equipment had dominated. Now only scattered debris remained. The central core pulsed with renewed vigor. Its red illumination brightened with threads of blue-white energy that matched Master Hoshin's blade. And Master Hoshin himself knelt beside Rio, one hand pressed to his student's injuries, channeling healing energy. "Master," Rio managed, his voice weak, "you came." "Did you doubt I would?" Hoshin asked, a rare smile softening his weathered features. Tholkar said, "You were hiding." Master Hoshin's expression hardened momentarily. "Tholkar knows nothing of patience or strategy. I was not hiding, but gathering allies." He gestured toward the temple entrance, where Rio could now see figures moving humans in Snow Empire Council regalia alongside what appeared to be other alien species, none bearing Kravtor characteristics. "The Council, how?" "Ichioko reached them with your warning," Hoshin explained. "And I had already been in contact with representatives from other worlds affected by Kravtor aggression. The alignment the Kravtor spoke of doesn't just affect their moons, it affects countless realms connected to this dimensional gate." Rio struggled to sit up, wincing as his injuries protested. "And Tholkar?" Master Hoshin's expression revealed nothing. "The ambassador has been humbled." As Rio's vision cleared further, he noticed what he had missed before, Tholkar kneeling in the center of the chamber, physically unharmed but utterly still. Before the Kravtor leader floated what had once been an ornate throne of metal and crystal, now split perfectly down the middle, each half suspended in energy fields generated by Master Hoshin's blade. "You split their throne," Rio whispered, understanding dawning. "The symbol of their authority, not just their physical throne," Hoshin corrected. "Their dominance over the entity. The connection they corrupted has been severed, allowing the pillar of divinity to begin healing." Rio looked toward Blood Moon, which now rested beside him, its glow steadier than before. "The sword, it guided me here. It wanted to reconnect with its source." "Of course it did," Master Hoshin said, helping Rio to his feet. "Blood Moon isn't just a weapon, it's a living extension of the entity that resides in this temple. The Kravtor tried to sever that connection, but some bonds transcend physical interference." As they spoke, council members approached, their expressions a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "Master Hoshin," the lead counselor acknowledged with formal respect. "Your intervention has prevented catastrophe, but questions remain. The Kravtor fleet still orbits our world. Without Tholkar's leadership, they may attack indiscriminately." "They will not," Hoshin assured her. "The split throne technique doesn't merely divide physical matter, it separates intent from capability. Tholkar lives, but the part of him that desired domination has been temporarily severed from the part that can command. He will recover, but not before we establish new terms." Rio regarded his master with newfound understanding. "You knew all along, about the temple, about Blood Moon's true nature, about the Kravtor's plans." "Not all," Hoshin admitted, "but enough to recognize the patterns. The Kravtor have attempted this before, on other worlds with similar connections to the entity. They seek to harvest its power without accepting its philosophy of balance." "And the son they mentioned?" Rio asked hesitantly. "They said I was your son." For the first time, Master Hoshin appeared momentarily discomfited. "There are many kinds of family, Rio. Blood is only one. I forged Blood Moon from the entity's freely given essence in a sense. The blade is my creation, my child, and you, as its chosen wielder, are connected to me through that bond." After a pause, he added more quietly, "But yes, in the more conventional sense, your birth parents entrusted you to me before they fell defending this temple from an earlier Kravtor incursion. You were too young to remember. The revelation struck Rio like a physical blow. All these years of training, of seeking approval, had been more than a student. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, emotion threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. "Would it have changed how you learned, how you grew?" Hoshin countered, "I needed you to find your own path to balance, not follow mine out of obligation." Before Rio could respond, the temple trembled around them, not violently as before, but as if stretching after long confinement. The central core brightened further, its pulsations forming more distinct patterns that coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape composed of pure energy. "The entity awakens fully," Hoshin observed, bowing deeply toward the manifestation. The council members and other allies followed suit, leaving Rio and the immobilized Tholkar as the only upright figures in the chamber. The entity's form stabilized, regarding them all with what felt like ancient awareness. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds rather than disturbing the air. "E-balance has been disrupted across many realms." It communicated. The Kravtor sought dominion without harmony. The humans sought power without understanding. Both paths lead to suffering. Its attention focused on Rio, who felt the weight of eons in its regard. "You came seeking truth, wielder of my essence. You found more than you sought. What will you do with this knowledge?" Rio glanced at Blood Moon, then at Master Hoshin, then finally at the defeated Tholkar. The ambassador remained physically unharmed despite his aggression, a testament to the entity's philosophy of balance rather than destruction. "I will restore balance where I can," Rio answered, finding conviction in words that once seemed merely his master's teaching. "Not through domination or separation, but through understanding. The Kravtor sought to harvest your power without accepting your wisdom. We humans have wielded your blades without fully honoring their purpose." He stepped forward, placing Blood Moon on the ground before the entity's manifestation. "I return this portion of your essence, freely given back to its source. If I am to wield it again, let it be with full understanding of its purpose." The entity's form rippled in what might have been approval. "The blade is not separate from me, nor are you separate from the cosmos." It responded, "Division is illusion. Connection is truth. Take up your blade again, Rio Kenzaki, but know this, its purpose is not to destroy, but to reveal the underlying unity of all things." As Rio reclaimed Blood Moon, the blade transformed subtly in his grasp, not physically, but energetically. Where before it had drawn power solely from the entity, now it seemed to channel something from Rio himself as well, creating a more perfect synthesis. The entity turned its attention to Tholkar, who stared back with a mixture of defiance and fear. "Your people once understood balance," the entity communicated. "Before ambition corrupted wisdom. The throne is split, but can be reformed, if you choose a different path forward." To everyone's surprise, the entity's manifestation divided, sending a portion of its energy into Tholkar. The ambassador gasped, his rigid posture relaxing as awareness returned to his features. "What have you done to me?" Tholkar demanded, though his voice lacked its former arrogance. "Reminded you of what you once were," the entity answered. "The choice of what you become remains yours." Master Hoshin stepped forward. "The Kravtor fleet will stand down," he instructed Tholkar. "A new accord will be negotiated, one that respects the autonomy of all worlds connected to the entity, including Earth." Tholkar rose unsteadily to his feet, all four arms hanging limply at his sides. "And if we refuse, then you will face not just the Snow Empire," one of the alien representatives interjected, "but a coalition of all peoples who revere the entity's gifts. Your technology is formidable, Ambassador, but it is derived from the very power you sought to steal. Without the entity's blessing, that technology will gradually fail. The truth of this statement was evident in the deteriorating condition of the Kravtor equipment scattered throughout the temple. Without the corrupted connection Tholkar had established, their extraction technology was already breaking down. For a moment, it seemed the ambassador might choose continued defiance. Then, with visible effort, he lowered his head in acquiescence. The Kravtor will consider new terms, he conceded. As diplomats from various worlds converged to begin negotiations, Master Hoshin drew Rio aside. The true test begins now, the old master said quietly. Winning a confrontation is simple compared to building a lasting peace. Rio nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on him with new clarity. I have much still to learn. As do I, Hoshin admitted with unexpected humility. The entity showed me aspects of balance I had not considered during our communion. There is always more depth to discover. Together they watched as the fractured throne of the Kravtor was carefully preserved rather than destroyed, a reminder of how easily power could be split from wisdom, and how necessary it was to reunite them. In the days that followed, Rio returned to the monastery with Master Hoshin, both changed by their experience at the temple. The council, impressed by Rio's role in averting catastrophe, offered him a position of political significance within the Snow Empyrean honor that would have once seemed the culmination of his ambitions. To their surprise, he declined. My path lies with the blade and its purpose, he explained to the disappointed council members. There are other cosmic blades scattered throughout the world, other wielders who may not understand their true nature. Master Hoshin and I must find them, teach them what we have learned. Kyoko, who had been instrumental in bringing reinforcements to the temple, chose to accompany them on this new mission. Her knowledge of ancient texts would prove invaluable in locating other blades connected to the entity. The Kravtor, under newly established terms, withdrew their aggressive presence from Earth's orbit. Ambassador Tholkar, fundamentally changed by his encounter with the entity, requested to remain as a liaison between his people and the emerging coalition of worlds. Whether this represented genuine transformation or political calculation remained to be seen. But the immediate threat had passed. On their final evening before departing the monastery, Rio stood in the courtyard where the Kravtor had first arrived to humiliate him. Snow fell gently around him as he practiced forms with Blood Moon. Not the aggressive combat techniques he had once favored, but flowing movements designed to channel harmony rather than force. Master Hoshin joined him, moving through complementary forms with his own blade. The snow falls on the worthy and unworthy alike, Hoshin observed. It does not judge who deserves its touch. Like balance, Rio suggested, understanding the lesson. It simply is. Indeed. Master Hoshin completed his form and sheathed his blade. The Kravtor sought to control power by dividing it from its source. They failed to understand that true strength comes from connection, not separation. Rio contemplated Blood Moon, which now pulsed gently in his hand, not with the fierce glory it had once displayed, but with steadier, more sustainable energy. When you split their throne, he said, recalling the decisive moment in the temple, you weren't destroying their power. You were showing them its true nature. The technique is called split their throne not because it destroys, Hoshin confirmed, but because it reveals the duality inherent in all authority, the responsibility that must balance privilege, the wisdom that must temper strength. As the snow continued to fall, Rio noticed something he had missed before, where each flake touched Blood Moon's surface. It didn't melt but briefly illuminated, carrying a tiny fraction of the blade's essence before continuing to the ground. By morning, A delicate network of luminous energy would connect the courtyard to the wider world beyond. The sword shares its nature, he realized aloud. It doesn't hoard power. Neither should we, Master Hoshin replied, beginning the preparations for their journey. Knowledge unshared diminishes over time. Knowledge given freely multiplies. As dawn broke over Mount Yurei, casting golden light across new-fallen snow, Ryo, Master Hoshin, and Chiyoko departed the monastery that had been their home. Behind them, students continued their training with renewed purpose. Before them stretched a world where cosmic blades awaited rediscovery and redemption. Blood Moon, secured at Ryo's side, pulsed with quiet anticipation not for combat or dominance, but for the restoration of balance in a universe where connection had too often been sacrificed for control. And somewhere beyond conventional perception, the entity that had forged the first bond between humans and cosmic power observed with patient optimism. The path forward would not be easy. Balance never was, but with each step, the harmony between worlds grew stronger, more resilient. Ryo Kenzaki, once merely the disciple of a reclusive master, now understood his larger role in this cosmic equilibrium. The sword at his side was not a weapon, but a key opening doors not just between dimensions, but between hearts divided by fear and ambition. As they descended the mountain path, the first true challenge of their new mission awaited. Not a battle to be won, but a conversation to be had with allies and former enemies alike. For in the aftermath of conflict, when swords were sheathed and thrones mended, the real work of balance would begin. And that, Ryo now understood, was the true purpose of Blood Moon's song.